So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're joined today by Jeff Klapes, who's the traveling librarian for another of his popular armchair travel presentations. Having visited more than 50 countries and 4 continents over the years, he does frequent armchair travel presentations showcasing the history and culture of various places using photography to capture people, scenery, and local details. This month, Jeff will present some of his all time favorite photos he's taken from all over the world, and he'll talk about how to plan and improve your travel photography, focusing on landscapes, people, architecture, color, and detail, and his personal favorite, black and white photography. And Jeff, of course, is the retired head of reference services at the Beebe Memorial Library right up the road in Wakefield, and he's an avid traveler and photographer. I again want to thank the Friends of the Library for sponsoring, as well as the Corning Life Sciences Foundation for all they do. And I expect some more folks to trickle in, but all 100 of us or so who are watching live and the many more that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Jeff for joining us here today. And Jeff, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Robert, and thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone, for joining me again. This is a little different, what we're going to do today, because if you've been to my programs before, you know we usually go somewhere. And this is a little bit different because we're going to go to a number of different places, and I'm glad to do. I haven't done this program in a while, and I'm kind of looking forward to it because it gives me an opportunity to kind of go over a lot of shots that I took years ago that I've kind of forgotten about. And the point is to try to talk about what you can do if you enjoy traveling and if you enjoy travel photography. I hope to give you a few tips on how you might be able to improve your own, and by showing you some of mine. And I need to emphasize, I am not a professional photographer, nor am I an expert, nor do I have incredibly expensive equipment. And I hope that that actually is better for you because it's a way to remind you that you don't have to be a professional. You don't have to have the most expensive camera to do really good stuff. And I think travel photography is for anyone who enjoys being creative and who enjoys traveling. The most important thing, I think, is for you to decide what it is what's the point of your travel photography? Not travel photography in general, but for you. What is it that you care about? Are you taking photographs simply because it's your own memories and you want to share them with your family or your friends? Are you taking them just because you need a creative outlet and this is a thing that you can do with it? Are you planning to sell it or share it on social media or try to do something with it commercially? There are different reasons why you might want to take photography when you travel. And it can be different from other kinds of photography. So I hope that some of the examples that I show will give you an idea of what you can do and what some of the issues are and how you can solve some of them. Most of the things that I'm going to show you today are older photographs, most of which were taken with a relatively small camera or a smartphone. I think I may have talked to you in recent programs that I do have a good camera and I like to travel with it. But in recent years, as smartphone cameras have gotten better and better, I'm finding that more often than not, I travel with only my phone, and it takes amazingly good photographs. If I were a professional photographer doing commercial photographs that I'm going to try and sell, maybe not so much. But I think for many people, if you have a recent smartphone, that may be more than enough for what you want when you're traveling. So the first thing I want to talk about before we actually look at some pictures is just a couple of do's and don'ts that I think are good to keep in mind when you are traveling. The first is to know whatever camera you're using, whether it is an expensive camera or not, whether it's your phone. It probably has a lot of features you've never used. I in fact discovered my phone today has a feature I did not know it had, so I'm anxious to go out and play with it. And that's half the battle often with photography, is knowing what you're able to do and not do with the particular technology that you have. The second thing that I would advise is, particularly in these days of digital photography, just take the picture. I remember years ago when I was traveling with little plastic canisters of film back in the days of film. And I had to number them, and there were a limited number of shots on each one, and you never knew how they were going to come out until you got them home and got them developed. With digital photography, that doesn't matter anymore. You can take thousands of photographs, and if they don't come out, who cares? You delete them. So take risks, take the photograph, try things that you might not normally do, and don't worry. If they don't come out, they don't come out. Um, Another thing to think about is, and I learned this actually from a couple of friends that I traveled with early on. Um, Travel photography often, people tend to focus on the things that you see in travel guidebooks and on Instagram and so forth. Try to see things differently. Look at your traveling experiences through your own lens, and try to see things that maybe other people might have missed. And again, because you can use a digital camera to do that, if your idea doesn't work, who cares? Part of doing that is to be patient. Sometimes you have to actually sit there a while. A lot of people ask me when I travel, why are there never any tourists in my photos? Well, that's because I sit and wait for them to go away. You may have to do that to get the right shot. You may need to wait for the bird to do what you want it to do, and wait for those tourists to get out of the way to make the shot perfect. So take the time to do that. Another thing that's very important, I think, when you're traveling, particularly in other cultures, is to be respectful. Not everybody wants to have their photograph taken. Some places have very different cultural expectations of what's intrusive and not. So try to learn a little bit about where you're going before you get there, so you understand the etiquette of what photography is like in those places.
Jeff,
And
can I interrupt
finally,
you for a second?
sure.
I know this is a little bit of a different presentation, so we don't
Oh,
see your
I forgot
slides
to
yet.
share.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if you did that purposely or not. I
No,
pinged
I
you, but I
didn't,
don't
and
know if
I
you saw the
totally forgot
message.
all about it. So
That's okay.
thank you for reminding me.
No worries.
I will share. I wasn't showing anything terribly exciting, but yes, you should still be able to see it. Um, that's better.
Yes, much better. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for pointing that out. Okay. So the last on my do list is practice. And again, because many of us have phones in our pockets now, or if you have an actual decent camera, um, practice at home. All of these kinds of things, you can't get better at anything until you do more and more of it. And if you are lucky enough to live in a place like Massachusetts, many people come here on vacation. Wherever you live, if you're interested in travel photography, try going to where you live and seeing it for the first time. Pretend you're a tourist. What would you take pictures of if you were visiting your hometown? And that's a good way to learn some of these skills and get better at them. The things that I would recommend that you don't do, first of all, don't forget to enjoy real life when you're traveling. Travel is an actual experience, a personal experience, and you don't want to live it completely behind the lens, because part of it should be that it's an experience. The reason you're documenting it is because it's supposed to be fun, so you want to actually enjoy it in real time as well. Don't get hung up on the gear that you travel with. You do not need an incredibly expensive camera. You don't necessarily need a tripod or an incredible telephoto lens. Those have their place depending on the kind of photography that you're doing. But as I said, you don't necessarily need an incredibly expensive camera, and the phone that you have in your pocket may be fine if you're not a professional. So don't worry about whether you have all the perfect stuff. Also, I've noticed recently with social media, it can get really out of hand where people are obsessed with social media, um, and making sure that you take photographs that are going to generate the most likes and the most engagement. Unless you're a professional that's actually monetizing your work, don't worry about that. It's your vacation. Enjoy it. And don't annoy the people you're traveling with by taking so many photographs that you forget to actually have fun on the vacation. Um, Also, this is just a little thing, but it's important to remember and kind of goes along with the concept of being respectful. If you are traveling in other cultures, bear in mind that there are places that may not only be, um, it may be against local etiquette to take photographs, but it may actually be downright illegal. There are plenty of places where taking photographs of military installations or certain buildings or police can be a problem. So don't get yourself in trouble. Anytime you travel, make a point to learn a little bit about the culture and what's acceptable practice and what's not. And finally, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this as I show you some examples, don't be afraid to process your photos. And by that, I mean, once you've taken a photo, or sometimes while you're taking the photo, depending on what camera you're using and what software it has, um, I talk to a lot of people who think there's something cheating about, the photograph is taking a picture of what reality looks like. And that's not really true. The photograph is taking an image of what you decided to compose based on the lens that it happens to be using. But that doesn't mean that there's no objective reality to that any more than a famous painter who's using watercolor or oil paints or whatever is presenting objective reality. When you take a photograph, you're telling a story. You're telling your story about what that particular location or feeling is the experience that you had when you took the picture. So don't be afraid to adjust your photographs by pumping up the color or turning it into black and white or sepia or anything. You can do all kinds of things with software now. It's not cheating to do that because what you are doing is creatively trying to convey something to the people who are going to see this image, which may only be you reliving your old vacation at some point later. So don't be afraid to do those things. And I hope as we go through the images that I show you, I'm going to give you examples of a lot of this kind of stuff. So let's go into that, look at some actual pictures. I'm going to start with landscapes, which are one of the most basic of travel shots that we all take when we're traveling, but they can be very hard to do because you're often trying to take pictures of very large scale areas. This is a non-traditional landscape photograph in a tiny abandoned village in Oman. And I want you to think of landscapes as more than just documenting the famous tourist sites of the places that you visit. Although you shouldn't feel guilty about taking those. If you go to Paris, you're going to take a picture of the Eiffel Tower. That's fine. But it's try to look at them in a slightly different way. Instead of taking a picture of the entire village, what I did instead is I took a picture from the inside of this house, this ruined house, showing the mountains in the background and the lush river valley that was behind it. For me, this conveys a better feeling of this place in my own memory as a more general landscape would have done. This is Mount Olympus in Greece. This is the kind of photograph that is similar to taking pictures of the Grand Canyon, for example. Any place that is so huge that a photograph never will convey the depth and the majesty of the real thing. So one of the ways that you can do that is by working with lighting. Lighting is crucial in these cases. Weather makes a big difference. And also using the foreground to help emphasize the depth in the photography. So this is a late afternoon image where I tried to use that lighting and also putting some foliage in the foreground to help convey a little bit of the depth of this magnificent canyon at the base of the mountain. Here's another example, also in Greece. This is Meteora in Greece, which you may know is a popular site where there are these amazing rock formations with medieval monasteries perched precipitously on the top. And if you had taken this identical photograph during the height of the middle of the day, it would have totally washed out all the landscape. It was much more impressive at sunset when you could. I actually took several photographs at this time period, experimenting with the way light hit the rocks at different times. Here's another one where this is in Bosnia, in a little village called Lukomir, way at the top of a plateau, right on the edge of a huge cliff into a canyon that's like 2,000 feet deep. I could have taken a picture of the canyon, and I did, but I think this actually gives a better feeling of it because this village is in a sort of wide open space on this plateau where it then drops off extremely steeply into this enormous canyon. And by putting the canyon in the background, you can see there's mountains, and it gives you the sense that there's a canyon there without actually showing it. And again, I could focus on the part of the village that I found most memorable, which was these sheep. And contrary to what I told you just before, this was in the middle of the daytime, so the light was coming straight down, which in this case worked better because it made it really lit the sheep in a way that I liked. This is that same village a little further down, where again, rather than showing the entire canyon, which you can see even the background here totally washes out in midday light. That kind of photograph would not be terribly dramatic, but by putting it in the background of a photograph where you can see what's on the edge of the canyon, I think you convey a better idea of what the landscape is really like by focusing on the cemetery and the little building that's literally on the edge of a 2,000-foot cliff. We're still in Bosnia. This is probably the most photographed monument in all of Bosnia-Herzegovina. This is the bridge in the city of Mostar, which is famous for having been destroyed, bombed and destroyed during the Yugoslavian wars of the 90s. But it was since rebuilt, completely rebuilt. And it's kind of a very emotional symbol of the war and the rebirth of the country after the war. This photograph actually is taken from the opposite side where everybody else takes the photographs from. And the reason I did that was mostly because of the lighting, because late in the afternoon, the western sun going behind the mountains lights the limestone buildings a little bit different, and they're slightly warm and pinkish depending on what time of day you are. And I found that this photograph actually almost looks like it could be an oil painting. And I liked that feeling because that's the sense I had when I was looking at it. Some other landscapes where, again, instead of just taking a picture of the grandeur of the space, I used other elements to try to bring out that depth. And in this case, this was a valley I actually drove to see, and when I got there, I couldn't see a thing because it was completely fogged in. But I waited about an hour, and most of the fog lifted except for the mist in the very lowest part of the valley. And I think that gives you a much better sense of just how dramatic the landscape is. The photos I took a little bit later when the fog had completely lifted are just not, they don't have the impact that this one does. Also in Bosnia, Bosnia is very forested, Bosnia-Herzegovina. And instead of taking a lot of pictures of the forested landscapes, I took one photo of a typical forest, which is a mix of deciduous and pine trees, evergreens, in the mist. And this photograph immediately takes me back to that trip. There's nothing terribly exciting about it. It's just trees in mist. But for me, it reminds me of this trip. Similar, but kind of an opposite feeling. This is very local. This is here in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. I liked the fact that all of these trees were lined up and I could create a very horizontal image with three very distinct bands. And this was in the height of daytime, which is why the lighting looks the way it is. And totally still, no wind, very hot. Here's another example of an impossibly large image. I would love to go back. This is in Montenegro, the Bay of Kotor, and I would love to go back there with different equipment to see if I could do something better. This really shows you the difficulty capturing an incredibly vast space that looks kind of like the Norwegian fjords. The only way that I think you can do this is with lighting. This is late in the day so that you get some of the shadows on the mountains and you can see them disappearing in the distance. Also managing to capture uh, a large cruise ship for scale. And I don't think you can do any photograph like this without having something in the foreground that creates a sense of depth. I mentioned light also makes a difference. This is in Laos, in the northern town of Luang Prabang, which is famous for its sunsets. In fact, there's a hill where you can climb up to the top of the hill, and everybody does that to look at the sunset every night. The problem is at least 300 other people are going to do that as well as you. And I discovered after the first night that I could see the exact same sunset down at the river where there was nobody. And in addition to the sunset, there all of the river boats were lined up, which I really liked from a compositional point of view. Sunsets are one of those kinds of photographs that you can definitely use filters and post-processing to try to bring out the color, because sunsets can be very difficult to capture. But this one, actually, I did nothing to. This is just the photo straight out of the camera. This is Namibia, probably, again, the most photographed place in all of Namibia. Namibia is in southeastern Africa. This is a place called Sossusvlei, which is a sort of hard pan desert, part of the Namib Desert. And it's surrounded by these massive, the world's largest, in fact, sand dunes. And it becomes very abstract because there's these gorgeous dead trees. So it's almost impossible to take a bad photograph here because all you have is the blue of the sky, the white of the ground, and the orangey red of the sand dunes, punctuated by the trees. So I took a whole series of both black and white and color photographs here, and they really are, you're doing nothing but shapes, because that's really all there is to see is the shapes, the curves of the sand dunes, contrasting with the spikiness of the trees. This is in the Peloponnese, in the village where we have a house that we go visit a couple times a year. This is one of my favorite little chapels, way up high over the ocean. But I actually like this photograph because it doesn't show the ocean. You'll notice there is no horizon here. You have no sense of where it is. And I deliberately did that because I wanted to create the sense that I have when I see this church, that it almost feels like it's coming out of the ground. It has that sense of like literally being almost building itself from the local rocks. And if you were to see that with the horizon behind it, it kind of takes away from that. So that's why I took this the way it is. You can take man-made objects, which are often part of the landscape. This is in New Mexico. I drove back and forth on this highway for probably 20 minutes finding the perfect spot. The main reason I liked these telephone poles was that they were all kind of askew. And I just like that. And it's actually a very common sight to see in the American Southwest. Also back to Laos in Southeast Asia. This is the Plain of Jars, which was surprisingly difficult to photograph. You may not be familiar with this archaeological site. These are carved granite jars that are about, usually maybe 6 to 8 feet high. They don't really know what they were for, but the best guess is that they were used as funerary burial jars. Many of them actually had stone lids that still exist. So they would have buried people inside the jars and then put a lid on top. But it's not really known for sure because there's just not a lot of archaeological evidence for the people who lived here 2,500 years ago. But they make great still lifes because there are literally hundreds of these jars spread out all over the plain. And I learned my lesson because we went there during the middle of the day and I discovered it was much better to go back later at night. And I got a much better result by taking almost the exact same photographs very late in the day when the sun was just going down, because it changed the color, it changed the light. It was just amazing, a far more moving experience. In fact, this is exactly that same photograph before, which has a different feeling at night. This is in Romania in the Transylvanian Alps. And this is an example where I did adjust the color. I punched up the blue because even though that may not be the exact true color when I was taking the photograph and looking at it with my human eyes, it's the feeling I had. It's part of the art. Like I said, you're telling a story of what it was like to be there at that time. And if you need to change the color to give people a better sense of what your feeling and your experience was, that's fine. You're not documenting reality. You're documenting your reality. I think unless you're actually a photojournalist, that's kind of a different set of circumstances. But if you're doing your own photography for your own creative purposes, you should feel free to do this kind of thing to tell the story that you want to tell, the emotion, the impression, the feeling you had when you were there. This is also the Transylvanian Alps. And again, I just realized this looking at it. This is, again, sheep with light coming down on them from the top. And that seems to work better than sheep lit from the side. I should think about that in my future sheep photography. This is in the Basque Pyrenees. I could have taken this picture showing all the mountains, but what was more important was to show the valley. It's on the border of France and Spain, this farmhouse just nestled down in the green. And I just found it more effective without the horizon. And you can clearly tell on this one, I think that that green is clearly unnatural. It was not that green, but it was really green. And so I like the very punched up green in this picture because that's how I felt when I was looking at it. It was the most vivid green I had ever seen. And you almost felt like you were falling down into the valley. This is near our village, near our house in Greece, one of the more famous villages that you can visit called Vathia. This is the standard postcard image that you'll see in almost every postcard or travel guidebook to the area, and it's taken at midday. It's fine, but I want to contrast it with the exact same place, a different viewpoint, but late in the day when, as the sun is going down, it's a completely different kind of experience. And I think some of the best images of this village are taken around sunset when everything turns golden. So it's worth it when you're traveling to imagine whether you should go back to a particular place that you liked to see if it works better at a different time of day. This landscape is exclusively about light. It wasn't the particular landscape I was taking a picture of wasn't all that interesting. It's a village in the Peloponnese, but it was after a storm, and the sunlight coming through the clouds as it was going down behind the mountain, I had to stop and take the photograph because it was just beautiful. And this is an example of that kind of thing where don't debate whether it will be a decent photograph or not. Just stop the car and take the picture. If it doesn't come out, no big loss. But in this case, I really liked the lighting. Also in Greece, this is a place called medieval fortress town called Monemvasia. And this is the church on top of the cliff. I did not actually deliberately line up the dome with the horizon, but it just happened to work out that way. And I think it actually works. It emphasizes the idea that this church is literally built on a cliff, and there's nothing but empty ocean beyond it. Here's the same one without the horizon. When you're on top of this rock, you really almost feel like you're on a ship sailing on the ocean. And I wanted something that would convey that feeling of feeling like you were on a boat, completely surrounded by water. Back to Bosnia. Again, this could be almost anywhere in the world. There's nothing about this photograph that specifically says Bosnia. But for me, again, I was on a plateau in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by huge blue sky and empty farmland. So this was my way of commemorating that by picking only those two elements, the wide open landscape and the enormous blue sky. It isn't important that it doesn't actually, that you couldn't look at that and know exactly which location it was. Let's talk about people now. I have a problem taking pictures of people because it can be very intrusive. Do you pose them? Do you do candid shots? Obviously, if they're the people you're traveling with, that's a little bit easier. But taking pictures of strangers, there's a lot of cultural issues. You should always ask permission if you're taking pictures of people, and be respectful, especially with children. And depending on which culture you're in, some people have more or less problem with that kind of thing. This is a man in a rural village in the mountains of Oman. Fortunately, these days, technology can help you out because you can take pictures of people with telephotos without really looking like you're taking a picture. And in fact, cell phone cameras are even better because you can take a picture that, unlike a camera where it's clear you're taking a photograph, with a cell phone, you can look like you're just looking at your phone when what you're actually doing is taking a sneaky picture of somebody from across the square. This is at St. Sava's Cathedral in Belgrade, Serbia. Because it was a wide open public space, it's not as much of an issue. I felt more guilty about this photograph, but I still like it. This was also in Serbia at a train station. This poor woman had just fallen asleep waiting for her train. Serbian trains are notoriously slow and few and far between. But I just loved the contrast between this obviously local woman and the advertisements for fast food. This is in Hawaii with just some tourists hanging out on the bench in a tourist location. But how can you not take a picture when there's a chicken right behind the woman? And again, this was telephoto, so I didn't have to worry that people necessarily knew they were being photographed. This is in Albania. And this was, again, just one of those lucky shots where I was in the right place at the right time. I loved the composition of these two guys on bicycles in opposite directions. The bikes have two different colors, even though the guys are dressed almost the same way. And in the background, there's a perfect dog just sitting there. So a lot of photography, I think, is just keeping your eyes open, looking for things, and being ready to take a photograph at the moment. This was another great example of that. This is kind of meta. We were in downtown Oslo in Norway on their national celebration day, and I got lucky just walking down the street. A lot of people were dressed that day in traditional costume because it was their national celebration day. So there were lots of people wearing those kinds of things. But modern Norwegians look a lot like the blonde woman on the left, sorry, on the right. So not only was I able to get both the traditional and the modern woman, but the guy taking a photograph of them at the same time. So always have your camera at the ready because you never know when you're going to get something good. These two are both in Venice. And the important thing I think about these two is the composition. The woman on the left is a tourist, don't know where she was from. But I loved the idea that's actually on St. Mark's Cathedral, where there's a statue, sort of medieval Byzantine era statue. And it almost, to me, I just found she's sitting there looking at her guidebook, and the statues almost look like they're gossiping about her behind her back. And I just loved that composition. The one on the right is some Italian sailors in the military who were in Venice, and they just happened to be walking by the Danieli Hotel, one of the most fancy and expensive hotels in the city, and they perfectly matched the Gothic arches above. This is a little more humorous. You would never know where this is. This could be in any number of places in the world, but it was Dubrovnik, which was overrun with tourists. It's one of those over-touristed places that you keep hearing about. And I just loved having all of these tourists sitting in one of the most historic cities in Europe, just chowing down on ice cream. To me, that represents my day in Dubrovnik more than a lot of other things. This is my grandfather's house in Greece. It's abandoned at this point and quite literally falling down. And this is his neighbor. Well, not him, my grandfather's long gone, but this is the neighbor who lives just below the house. And this was one where I was talking to her and a couple of other people in the neighborhood. I just took the picture because I had to. Her expression was just wonderful. A couple of others. The one on the left is in Romania in a castle. She looked completely Romanian to me until I discovered she was actually a German tourist. She wasn't the least bit Romanian. But I loved her outfit. It just fit with my image of rural Romania. And I deliberately blurred it a little bit just because I liked that effect. The other one on the right is a monk, a young monk, sitting on a temple in Laos. And just the color in that case was what attracted me to that picture. Here's a guy in Roswell, New Mexico, a local busker. I loved him. I loved his color, the color of his guitar and his shirt, with behind him this completely blank concrete building. This guy is a Sikh gentleman on a ferry in Dubai. And this was one of those cases where I clearly had to cheat because he was very close to me and I had to pretend I was taking a picture of something behind him. I doubt he believed me, but I got away with a great photograph out of it. Also in Dubai, just a local guy sitting there. This one I was able to take with telephoto. This is me, actually. Many years ago, I traveled with a friend to the island of Bonaire, which is a Caribbean island just off the coast of Venezuela. And they have salt pans there, and they're still in use. They still produce salt on the island, but there's a number of slave huts back 150 years ago when slaves were the ones who did most of the work in these salt pans. They had these huts that they were able to, very small, not even as big as like your garden shed. But the idea was that they could sleep in them during the worst heat of the day and do most of the work early in the morning and late in the afternoon. So this is my friend just taking a picture of me through the doorway. And I had a fun bathing suit at the time. So again, it's totally abstract. Here is a woman also with telephoto that I took at a mosque in Istanbul. It's almost black and white, but not quite. The only color in this photograph is the skin tone on her face and the brass faucet and the fountain behind her. These are guys in a fish market in Oman. Markets are a great place to photograph people because you don't have to feel quite so intrusive in a market because they're very busy. There's all kinds of activity going on, and people are kind of used to the idea that people want to, there's so much imagery there. There's imagery of the people, there's imagery of the things that they're selling. So if you're a little nervous about taking pictures of people, local markets are a good place to start. And I should also emphasize that don't forget animals are people too. And they don't have any of the issues of being intrusive, but they have lots of personality. This, I think, was in Kuala Lumpur in an aviary where you could get up really close to the birds. This is in northern Greece, kind of on the border with Albania. There's some beautiful lakes there that are um, very important for birds migrating from Europe to Africa at different times of year. This is another one where I just got lucky. I'll show you a couple of other bird photographs later that I did differently. This was just this is a still photograph that I took at precisely the right moment to get a decent shot. It's a little out of focus, so I'm not happy about that, but capturing the pelican at that precise moment was luck. I love goats. You can always make new friends when you're traveling, and goats are very, very photogenic and very happy to be photographed, as are cats. I don't even remember. This is probably Greece, which has more cats than any other country per capita, I'm sure. This is a place I stayed where I ate in this restaurant at night, but in the morning it was timed perfectly for the sun to light up the front of the restaurant, and that's where all the cats hung out. Also in Oman, I got lucky in this place. These kids actually wanted to be photographed, and if you get lucky enough to find people like that, it's a way to make friends. I've actually sometimes taken photographs of people and then emailed them the photograph because they can then share it. They may not have a camera of their own, and they can share it. So these kids actually pestered me to take photographs of them, and I loved them. And also just with telephoto, these are kids in the Luxembourg Gardens in Paris and two elderly gentlemen in the mountains of Greece. This is going to be me in a couple of decades. I deliberately blurred these guys because I almost felt this was a sort of watercolory feeling very early in the morning at the fish market in Oman. And also in Oman, this is another shot where I felt like the color was so washed out. I actually liked the fact that it's basically almost just black and white and very pale shades of blue. Some guys walking on the beach. And you can always find humor in photographs like this. This is a fountain in the Luxembourg Gardens where I just got lucky to be in the right place at the right time again. Not all portraits are people. I liked this cow. This is a cow in Greece. And also in Greece, these are some photographs I took just last month. I had to throw in a couple of more recent ones. And the reason I'm showing you these is because, again, with most digital cameras now, and certainly with most phone cameras, you can take video, including very high quality video. You don't have to have a video camera. So this was on a ferry where we were being constantly followed by seagulls. So what I did was I took lengthy videos of different things that the seagulls were doing, and then you can take still photographs out of the video. So all of these are just still photographs that I took by picking exactly the frame that I wanted out of a video. So I got 3 very artistic photographs of seagulls at precisely the right moment. So that's something that you can experiment with anything that's moving, particularly animals or people. And I want to talk a little bit about details, because very often people forget that details can be the most telling part of conveying the feeling of a place or a memory. All those landscape shots that you take of the Eiffel Tower and the Trevi Fountain, they don't always tell the whole story. I'm particularly partial to architectural details myself because of my background. That's what I studied in college. This is in northern Greece in the inside of a Byzantine church. The only thing that you could see in this church, just because of the lighting, was the light coming through the window. Everything else was pitch black. But it becomes almost an abstract image with the little fresco. This is the detail of, these are hanging storage containers in a fort in Oman. which again conveys for me the feeling of what that fort was like. If you're wondering why these hang the way they are, it's because in the desert climate where there's all manner of vermin trying to eat things, plus a lot of heat, these hanging clay pots were a way of storing liquids and other olives and other kinds of things, dates, um, up off the ground, which made it harder for animals to get at them and also kept them cool. So it's a very common way of storing things there. And again, this is another place, along with this photograph in the same fort, where I washed out the color, and also it's a little fuzzy, and that's deliberate because I just liked the sense of what that did to the light. These are in Hawaii on the island of Kauai, um, on a hike along the cliffs. And these, I forget what kind of tree they're called. I should have written that down. But I liked these trees because there was something about them that if you saw you probably remember the old Disney film Fantasia, where the Sorcerer's Apprentice has the brooms all come to life. These trees almost made me feel like that scene. Like out of the corner of your eye, if you turned to look away, the trees would move around on their own, like they were actually sentient. And the light, the sort of hazy light coming through the very tropical air, um, helped me convey that. The thing about detail shots is they could be anywhere. This picture, you would have no way from looking at it. You might guess it's Mediterranean just because of the architecture, but not necessarily. This is in Montenegro. I liked the woman and the cat early in the morning after a rain. But again, the reason why you take detail photographs is not so much because you're trying to document um, the travel images of the place you went to, but because they're a memory for you. Some small thing that tells you about what it felt like to be in this place, in that place. This is El Paso, Texas. It's a decrepit old furniture store. I played with filters on this to give it more of a vintage feel, because a lot of El Paso has this feeling to it. This is a detail in Paris, a church. I particularly liked it because it has a sense of movement. It's almost like this mythological being is almost physically coming around the column. This is a ghost town in New Mexico. Again, I processed this afterwards to give it more of an antique-y feeling. I bled out a lot of the color. It looks like something out of a horror movie. And that was very deliberate. This has no processing whatsoever, but it is a horror movie. This was bomb damage, a hospital in Laos that had been heavily bomb damaged and was now nothing but a ruin after the damage that occurred in Laos during the Vietnam War and after. This is in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. And what I wanted to show here was architectural details, because you can see multiple layers going off into the distance with different colors and different types of building materials. On the left is Istanbul also. This is just an alleyway that I happened to pass by and thought it was one of the most beautiful things I had seen in the city. I loved the washed out colors. I loved the depth and the richness. And you could easily have walked by this without noticing it. For me, it reminds me a lot of many neighborhoods in Istanbul that I saw. On right is in Vathia, the village that's near us in Greece. I don't actually know why they fill a lot of places in Greece. You'll find old abandoned houses where they've filled the window frames with stones. But I enjoy those kinds of architectural details. These are some carvings in a church in southern France. Also in France, this is in the Basque Country in the town of Bayonne, which has the same name as the town in the city in New Jersey, Bayonne. Although having been to both, I much prefer the one in France. These are very typical style buildings in that city and in that whole region in France. But if you take standard photographs of them straight on, I don't find them as impressive. This was a photograph that I took on an angle to see how many of them I could squeeze into a photograph, and I think it actually gives a better sense of this long row of buildings with that very local style. This is in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and I was very lucky to be there. This is the Grand Mosque in the city, which is not that old. It's only about maybe 20 years old, but it's a spectacular building. And I was able to take advantage of the fact that there had been a tremendous thunderstorm about an hour before I got there. So the light with the sun coming through the clouds was beautiful. And I do have photographs of the entire building, but this one that just shows one particular corner of it with the light behind it, I think is just as effective. Here's a fort in Oman where I used a filter to get a sparkly effect on the windows with the light coming through. Also in Oman, another abandoned village with very muted colors. This is, I did nothing to this photo. This is exactly what it looked like, just very pale, sort of aqua colors on some of the woodwork, and then earth tones. But I liked the muted late afternoon colors. In that same village, this is the inside of a house that had paintings on the roof and on the ceiling. This is in a mosque in the very northern Greek town of Kavala. Much of northern Greece has a lot of Ottoman influence back when it was part of the Ottoman Empire. So this mosque, I loved the interior of this mosque because it almost looks like a watercolor. All of the paint on the stucco interior is very washed out, and I just love the look of that. Another detail of a roof in Greece. This is more about texture than anything else. The same here, where I love the texture of the buildings. This is a Byzantine church, which has some wonderful sculptural details. And the best time to take photographs of those is anytime the light is low, whether that's early morning or late afternoon, because that really brings out the shadows, and also color, particularly if it's in stone, because the warm color of the morning or evening sun really brings that out. Same thing here. Twilight light gives you a very subdued feeling. This is a cafe in the town of Monevasia. This is also one of the most photographed places in that because there's a particular cafe where there's always empty seats and a few leftover coffee cups looking out over the ocean. Gives you the impression that somebody left just a few minutes ago. Here's a detail in Srebrenica in Bosnia, which was the location of one of the worst massacres during the Yugoslavian civil wars of the 90s. It is now turned into a museum, so there was a photographic exhibit, and the building has really been left untouched, so it hasn't been restored. There's chipped paint, and for me, here's another one of the same place. You really feel like you've stepped back into the time period when this was all going on. Markets I mentioned are always fun to take photographs of, particularly the vibrant colors of different kinds of fruits and vegetables, fish, so on. This could be any market in the world, and it doesn't matter. It's the color that, in this case, I think is important. Same here. This is the detail of an Ottoman house in Bosnia, where there was a bath, actually. So many Turkish bath buildings have either circles or stars in the ceiling with colored light that lets light come through. This is in Ljubljana in Slovenia, which is an amazing city. If you've never been, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite cities in Europe. This was just I happened to see this by the side of the road, and we were there in the fall, um, and it's just a little detail that struck my fancy. Um, and I didn't plan this, but there's a dead leaf. I could have removed the leaf, but I actually kind of like the leaf. Um, Also in Slovenia, this is a castle in Lake Bled, uh, which is one of the most popular places to visit in Slovenia. And I took this picture because even though one of my favorite sentences in all of literature is from a book called Black Lamb and Gray Falcon, which was a book by the famous travel writer Rebecca West, who spent quite a little bit of time traveling in Eastern Europe and the Balkans. And one of my favorite sentences, which I'll read to you now, it's not actually about this place, but when I saw this chair, this to me was it was a physical representation of that literature. She was in a garden actually in Serbia, but she described the garden as the gardens were mystifying. Inside the beautifully tended box hedges, the flower beds were choked with weeds, and a single garden chair made of white painted wire in the Victorian fashion was set quite alone on a wide gravel space, with an air of deluded sociability, as if it had gone mad and thought that there were about it many other garden chairs. I just love that sentence. And when I saw this garden chair, I said, this is exactly what she was talking about. So I had to make a photograph of it. This is an antique market in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And when I looked at this, all I could think of was Dr. Seuss. I just imagined all of these old-fashioned, um, uh, I forget what they call them, gramophones. I almost forgot the word. I could picture them almost throbbing in a cartoon with the music coming out of them. This is a close-up of a tide pool in Maine, where I just liked all of the color and the fact that you can actually see the surface of the water and the surface tension in the water. Here's the exact same tide pool, but with the light, a feather floating on the water, and the light not the light actually doesn't penetrate the surface of the water the way it did in the previous photo. It washes it out, so you end up with two layers, and it looks much more painterly. I liked that. I took countless photographs of temples when I was in Laos, but this one, this is a close-up of showing the roof structure of a particular temple because I liked the abstract sense of the very white edging of the roof lines with the darker decorations of the roof. In a ghost town in a general store in New Mexico, this was a restored ghost town which they had recreated the original general store to be kind of what it would have been like back when people lived there. And there was a shelf that had a bunch of cowbells and this, I guess it's a bighorn, the skull of a bighorn sheep. And again, these are the actual colors. I did not do anything to this photograph, but the muted palette, which is basically gray, white, and brown. Plus, I liked the contrast of the very rectangular things on one side and the very curved things on the other. Back in Laos, this is in Vientiane, the capital. The composition that I cared about in this photograph is, you can kind of see there's a big stucco blob here, which was a piece of repair work that had been done to the wall with the Buddha next to it. This is in Budapest, a sculpture that seems to almost come alive right peeking around the corner. Also in Budapest, I took plenty of pictures of the Parliament building because you have to. It's the most famous building in the city. But I also loved these opalescent lamps on the side of the Parliament building. So they become kind of an abstract sculpture And again, this was a case where I used a filter to make the opalescence a little bit more than it was in real life, because that was the effect that I was trying to remember. This could be anywhere. It happens to be in Oregon, but I was there during a time of year when the leaves were brilliantly spring green. So again, this is just an abstract image. Back in Serbia, this is in Belgrade. This looks like a black and white photograph, but it isn't, because it's almost black and white, but the building was stucco. And I just loved how the modern mural picked up a lot of the black and white decoration of the historic building, the murals on the side. This was in Sarajevo, and this is a Muslim cemetery in Sarajevo. And you can probably see I bled out a lot of the color. There's almost, you can barely see a hint of green. And the reason I did that is because I felt like the shapes were more important than the colors in this picture. I wanted to focus on the actual sculptural design of the monuments, and you lost a little bit of that if the green distracted you from it. Here's another weird photograph from, I don't know if anybody, those of you who are in Massachusetts may have been to MassMoCA, which is the Museum of Contemporary Art in North Adams, way up on the New York border, in far western Mass. And this was an exhibit where they had some photographs, large-scale photographs, but they had holes in them. So I'm actually looking through to the gallery behind, where there was a woman, and I like this photograph because it's very disorienting. When you were there, it made sense, but if you look at this photograph without context, it completely throws you off. You are looking through a large, like, I don't know, 6 or 8 foot tall printed photographic display through to the gallery behind it. This is a market in Oman. Again, I have tons of photographs of the market, but this one I like the best because it shows the tile floor, and I liked the contrast between the solidity of the floor and the movement of the person who happened to be walking by when I took the picture. Here's a detail of Greece, unusually in the rain because there's not a lot of rain there, but this is one of the most iconic images of Greece. This is an olive tree, the very essence of the olive groves. And it's a close-up, so it could be any tree anywhere in the Mediterranean, but it reminds me of the particular woman I was visiting and the house that she was at. I also like taking pictures of close-ups of flowers because they can be very sculptural. These are flowers from my garden a few years ago, where I had some roses. Again, these have obviously been processed, but I could turn them into almost abstract images if you play with color. Same thing here. This is a chapel in Greece where I washed out the color because that's really kind of the feeling I had when I was there. It's very drab, mostly just neutral tones, earth tones. I forget which Orthodox church I was in, but this is some votive candles that you can place in a church. An antique door in Greece where you can almost feel the wood, which was the feeling I was going for. And now let's talk a little bit about color. This is a door in Kavala, the town in northern Greece. Just a simple contrast between the color of the building and the color of the door. And I liked the fact that the door actually had dust on it, on the moldings, that had actually come off the building. So you have a little bit of they work together in this photograph. More farmers markets, peppers. These are local peppers, typical of the area. And I liked this because it not only picked up the vibrant color of the pepper, but also the entire background of this store, including what the woman was wearing, happened to be red as well. This is in Slovenia. It was a modern staircase, spiral staircase in a renovated building. So again, this is just sculptural. I just love the color in this. It's bright lipstick red. The fabrics stacked up in a market in Thailand. You might notice in this, I ruined this photograph because that's the shadow of my head down at the bottom, which if I had a better camera at the time and better software, I could have either, well, first of all, I would have known ahead of time and taken another photograph, or I could actually remove the shadow by manipulating the photograph later. This is in Uruguay, an old house with just very faded, soft, very dusty, chalky colors on the side of the building. The bright color of a house in Old San Juan in Puerto Rico. The door is actually not black. It almost reads as black, but it's just very, very dark brown. Back in Laos, these are monks early in the morning, making merit by accepting donations of rice early in the morning. Here's some, this is something called one-point color, which you can sometimes do with cameras or software. This is in a town near us in Greece, where I just like the fact these are roadside shrines, although these are not actual roadside shrines in use. They're sort of abandoned ones that people piled by the side of the road. They were probably to be disposed of, but they were sort of a pale blue, as was the car that happened to be parked next to them. So I took this photo just because I liked the blue. I completely got rid of all the colors except the blue, because that's what I happen to like about it. Back in New Mexico, again, this is color definitely processed. I liked that this was red, white, and blue. So I emphasized the three major colors. Same thing here. This is another building in El Paso, Texas, where I don't know why it was painted in these colors, but I really liked it. And there was a sort of, there was bad weather, so the clouds worked well over the top of it. Very soft clouds contrasting with very rectilinear colors down at the bottom. This is Istanbul, which you wouldn't ordinarily think a lot of Istanbul is just old gray buildings, but it's not. There's an enormous amount of color there. So there's color in the vehicles, there's color in the buildings, even though it was a very gray day. That actually works better because the absence of a blue sky makes you focus on all the colors that are in the city. Here's another one-point color photograph where these are dried chilies in New Mexico, and I removed everything from the photograph except the red. This is in Laos, in Vientiane, the capital, and I did nothing to this photograph. The beautiful golden glow here is solely due to the fact that late in the afternoon, the western setting sun lights up this temple in the most unbelievable colors. Here again, focusing on the color where the orange almost floats above the background because it's so bright. This is in Vancouver, in Canada, in the temperate rainforest that's up in the Pacific Northwest. Everything's covered with moss, everything's wet, and I liked that this just captured that that sense of dampness and the different textures of green, from the leaves to the pine needles to the moss. Also in Vancouver, this was the view from my hotel room, where the beautiful scenery in the background contrasts with these with the bright sun lighting up the derricks in the cargo port. right along the water. This one is in Romania, in northwestern Romania, a rural area that still is very, very traditional in their agriculture. And this is an image that I deliberately tried to take in almost an impressionistic way. They had haystacks everywhere, and I went a little overboard with the haystack photographs. But everywhere I looked was a Monet painting, essentially. So that's kind of what I was going for here. Also in Romania, this is a forest in Transylvania as you go up into the Transylvanian Alps. And again, just the layers of color. This is what that whole area looked like. The luminous algae of wharf pilings in Astoria in Oregon. Obviously, this is another one where I brought the green out deliberately. This is in Istanbul, looking across to the non-historic side of Istanbul. If you're looking across to the Asian side, across the Bosphorus, these balloons, which I initially thought were part of some art installation, it turned out to be target practice for guys who were shooting them with rifles out over the water. But it made for a great photograph because opposite are the very spiky skyscrapers and the derricks in the cargo, where the cargo ships are, and the industrial sector, and the playful round color of the balloons in the front. I like that contrast. This is another example of color in Istanbul, probably one of the ugliest neighborhoods in Istanbul, just big modern concrete apartment buildings. But if you really look at them, you'd be surprised how much there is actually going on there in otherwise uninteresting buildings. Again, back in Oman, this is two colors. That teal, again, no color processing in this, just a beautiful aqua d'or against the earth tones of the village. I've shown you some pictures already of the town called Monemvasia in Greece. This, I liked the contrast not only of the color, a renovated building with beautiful bright orange paint, but also the contrast in shapes. We have a very rectangular architectural things, and then the curvy chair next to each other. This is in Kavala in Greece again. I love the reason I took this picture is just you have primary colors almost all in the same shade. An ensemble of red, yellow, and blue, all of which have roughly the same tone, the same shade. And also in northern Greece, not far from the other photograph, is spring poppies, vibrantly red poppies all across by the side of the highway. In Malaysia, these are lanterns in a Chinese temple. Roofs in Serbia, a town in northern Serbia. I particularly liked this image because you can see these are all the same roof, but from different time periods. So you have extremely old terracotta roofs, you have very brand new restored terracotta roofs, and some from kind of in the middle. So it's the same architecture, but you can see the difference between the different time periods. Another very impressionistic image. I loved this bridge this is in Visegrad, eastern Bosnia, a very historic bridge. And the color of the bridge, the color of the light lighting up the trees on the mountain behind it, the water, it's just again, I have some very standard photographs of this, but I love this one because it makes me remember the light that afternoon. And finally, I want to take you through a few black and white photographs, which personally I prefer. They're the kind I like to take the most. My house is full of framed photographs that I took in black and white, and I like it because it forces you to focus on light and texture and shape. you've always been able to do that because, of course, color photography didn't come along until long after photography was invented. So for a very long time, that's all people were doing. And they did it very well, and you can learn from them. Um, I would recommend, actually, I don't know if any of you have seen on, I think it's Netflix, the series called Ripley, which is based on Patricia Highsmith's novel, The Talented Mr. Ripley. And to many people's surprise, it was, even though it's filmed and takes place in Italy, it was filmed on the Amalfi Coast, which is brilliant and colorful, and it's Italy, but they filmed it in black and white. And a lot of people were surprised by that, but it's incredibly gorgeous. I think if you've watched it, you probably know what I'm talking about. You can pause almost anywhere in that series, and you've got a gorgeous black and white still photograph. It was so beautifully done. So I'd recommend that. This is an Art Nouveau lamppost on a bridge in Slovenia. This is in one of the big parks in central Belgrade in Serbia. I just was struck by the four completely different vertical elements. There was a tree, there was a monument, there was a skyscraper in the distance, and some people at a bench. I think if I were to take it again, I might remove the tree branches, but I'm not sure. I would play with the composition of that. This is black and white in the Namib Desert. And if you remember the first photograph I showed you, which was brilliant blue sky and the orange sand, why would you take a black and white photograph in a place like that? But in this case, the sky, the grass, and the tree, I felt really worked for me. The blob in the tree, if you're curious, is a nest for weaver birds. Weaver birds live communally, so that's one nest that probably had, I don't know, tens or scores of birds living in a giant bird condominium, and you see them throughout the desert there. This is exactly the same location that I showed you before, with the dead trees and the red sand dunes, but instead, in this case, I was focusing on shapes. So here you have three of those same dead trees, but forming a triangle that kind of recedes into the distance. So I could play with shape and texture instead of color. Same thing, the Namib Desert in a slightly different place with a weird tree. This is in Hawaii, the giant fig trees that have these incredible roots that are almost like sculptures. And a close-up of those. This is in Montenegro, just the detail of a windowsill. I don't know why this particular house had a collection of shells on the windowsill, but I just loved it. All you see is the texture of the stone, the texture of the shells. Also, this is in Croatia, the city of Split, which is one of the most beautiful places in Croatia. This open oculus is in an old Roman building that they use for concerts. Has really nice acoustics. So the sun, I wanted to capture the sun coming through, making an interesting shape on the side of the dome. You may notice there's a little weed growing here. And I eventually printed this out, this photograph out to frame. And when I did, I got rid of the weed because it was driving me crazy. And that's another thing that, again, I don't think you should feel guilty about doing that. This photograph was perfect except for that annoying little weed, which I couldn't do anything about. So get rid of it. There's software that you can use to get rid of it. If you've taken the perfect photograph, except for the annoying guy whose elbow got stuck in the middle of it, get rid of his elbow. There's ways to do that. And I don't think it's cheating. Also in the same city, this is also in Split, there's a sculptor, famous Croatian sculptor named Ivan Mestrovic, where there's his house and museum has a number of sculptures, these giant oversized sculptures of Czech women. I liked them. This was actually in an exhibition space and a hall where they have concerts and other things, hence the chairs. So I liked the contrast between the black chairs and the white sculptures, and also this sense of movement towards the right. That village that I took you to very early in the program called Lukomir has some beautiful medieval tombs, again with the contrast between the foreground and the background um, where the canyon is off in the background. A bridge in Ljubljana. Actually, it's the same one I showed you before. I had a close-up of this lamp um, focusing on shapes. This is in a neighborhood in Istanbul. Why would you take a picture of people's ugly television antennas? Because you like the shape and you like the color. I just was fascinated by the contrast of the cables and this. They make me think of flowers in a garden. So it's all about the shapes and the black and white contrast. Um, I believe this was in Thailand, probably in Bangkok. Buddhas are often very colorful with flowers and gold leaf and robes wrapped around them, but they're also very sculptural. So this, I wanted to focus just on the shape of the hands. In Transylvania, this is a fortress church called Prejmer. Um, the rooms that you see here were when the town was under siege. All the people in the village would come in, and each one of them had a numbered, almost like a hotel room where they could stay during the siege. I like the horizontal versus vertical elements. Even in real life, it's almost black and white, but this is a black and white photo. And then this is the exact same photo, which I softened a little bit to give it more of the sense of a 19th century lithograph. The same church. Oh no, I take it back. This is back in Laos. Shafts of light with dust in the air become actual solid elements. They're almost like the roof beams. This is the texture of shingled roofs in a monastery in Romania. Nothing but texture in this one. And also in Romania, this is a still life in a farmhouse, just baskets sitting on a stool. And even beautiful flowers. This is a peony, which was probably bright red, but if you get rid of all the color and do it in black and white, all you see is the shape. And it almost becomes like a Georgia O'Keeffe, focusing only on that. One of the mosques in Istanbul, this is actually called the New Mosque, which is a riot of domes and half domes. I have a number of color pictures of this, but the black and white is actually far more effective, I think, because it makes you focus on the architectural shapes. And one of my favorites, this is in San Sebastian in the Basque region in Spain. It's a fantastic old Baroque church, but it has this wild modern sculpture stuck on the front, which seems completely incongruous, but somehow the contrast between the modern sculpture and the ancient church worked for me. And I got completely lucky because this little kid that just happened to be going by at the moment adds a little bit of joy. And I feel like he's somehow connected to the playfulness of the modern sculpture. And somehow this would not work as well in color as it does in black and white. Same with this. This is a cemetery in Bordeaux, a crypt. This is the wife of Nero in a museum in Olympia in Greece. And in Oman, a still life of kitchen objects, baskets and pitchers and things and so forth. And again, the focus here is on the texture, not so much the color and the contrast in textures. This is back in Monemvasia, where most people would take color photography because the roofs are vibrantly colored and there's the green trees and the blue ocean, but by doing it this way, you focus on the buildings themselves. This is in central Greece. Again, the point of this photograph is the shape. And here as well in northern Greece, this is a town called Kastoria, which is very heavily influenced by the Ottoman style. And a lot of the buildings have these, the second story stick out above the first story, and they're held up with these beams. And even if I had taken this as a color photograph, it's almost black and white. There's very little color, just the dark beams and the very pale stone of the building. But if you wash out all the color, it's even better. This is in a town in Serbia, an abandoned house that just, I loved the ghostly sort of haunted feeling. And the last one I'm going to show you, we'll end the program here. This is air conditioners on a high-rise tower in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Hardly the most attractive thing to see in Kuala Lumpur by a long shot, but it appeals to me for two reasons. One, it reminds me of a lot of what is real life in Kuala Lumpur, which is giant skyscrapers with air conditioners stuck on the side. And I also like it just because of the abstract shapes. It is representative to me of the city. It's not the only photograph I took of the city, but it reminds me of my experience there. So I'm going to end the program there, and let's go back and look at some of the questions that came up. And if you have any more, feel free to. Were there any in the chat? Oh, yeah, there's some in both. Oh, someone likes my octopus shirt. Thank you. I love my octopus shirt as well. A lot of the question, as I'm looking at a lot of the questions, a lot of them seem kind of similar in that people are asking me how I did certain things. And there's no quick answer to that because it depends. I will tell you about the equipment I've had. Many of the photographs that you saw in this presentation are older ones that I took with a variety of cameras that ranged from a small Kodak, not very expensive, kind of like entry-level Kodak camera, to a much more expensive Fujifilm with a really fancy telephoto. Most of the photographs that I've been taking recently, I have a Samsung Galaxy smartphone, which has a really nice camera. I'm not specifically recommending Samsung over others, but I can say that if you have sort of the higher end, like flagship phones these days, whether it's an iPhone or a Samsung or a Google Pixel, for most people, particularly if you're not a professional, the quality of cell phone cameras right now is really amazing. And I take, with the exception of a lot of telephoto, specifically telephoto and wildlife photography, I have found that my cell phone cameras take almost as good photographs as my real camera. And so in recent trips, I have focused mostly on that. And someone asked me if I could recommend a particular small but not expensive camera. I can't really, because that changes so quickly. I've been a big fan of Fuji and or Panasonic, but I hesitate to recommend them because literally like every 6 months, all of the big brands are coming out with new cameras and different features and new software. So I think the best that you can do is really think about what you want and and what your price range is. One thing I can recommend is try looking at CNET. If you haven't used CNET, that's a great website for technology. If you want reviews, really good quality reviews, both user reviews and professional reviews on the same site. CNET.com has all kinds of tech reviews, including cameras. So if you're trying to buy a camera, you can look for particular cameras in a price range, and they'll give you very good reviews about that will help you based on what your needs are. I think, as I said, I think you can do well with a phone camera these days. The main thing I don't like about phone cameras is that, and I don't know if you can see, I actually attached a little strap to mine because I am always terrified when I'm using my camera. Phone cameras are not designed to be held the way a real camera is that has a grip. They don't have a viewfinder, and there are times when I really miss the physicalness of holding an actual camera that I feel like it's sturdily held in my hand and I can control it and I can aim it. And with a viewfinder, it doesn't matter how bright it is if you're out in bright sunlight. So there are definitely some advantages to having a real camera. But like I said, if I really am not in a position to recommend anything, but use CNET as a good starting point. Many of the other questions that I'm looking at are related to how I did certain effects, and in general, the answer to all of those questions is software. Any cell phone camera that you have and any digital camera that you buy now is going to have a lot of software built into it that allows you to filter. It allows you to take photographs in black and white or color or sepia. It allows you to take night photographs. It allows you to take sunset photographs. It allows you to get rid of red eye. All those kinds of things are part of the software that comes with your camera. And you can do that while you are taking the photograph, or in most cases, once you've taken the photograph, there's all kinds of software, whether it be something on your computer or in your phone, where you can adjust things after the photograph has been taken. And that's why, going back to the do's and don'ts that I mentioned at the very beginning, one of the most important things you can do is learn whatever you're using, whether it's your phone or an actual camera. Learn the features, many of which you may not use, and that's fine. You don't have to use all the features on your phone, but learn whether they're there or not, and practice feeling comfortable with them so that when you find yourself somewhere where that feature would be perfect, you're not starting from square one and figuring out how to do it at the last minute. The name of the town in the Berkshires, I don't remember, but it was probably like Lenox, Lee. We were somewhere in that area. And somebody also wanted to know, in the Namibian desert, how did I get the shadow out of the picture? There weren't any shadows because we foolishly went into the desert at like 12 noon. So the sun was coming straight down. So there were almost no shadows. Someone wants to know how to take a still photo out of the video. Again, that's a software thing. In most cases, if you take a video, you can then go back and look at the video and proceed through the video one frame at a time. You can speed up a video, you can slow down a video. Depending on your phone or your camera, that software may be built into the phone itself. Or if you want to do more fancy things, you can have, there's all kinds of additional video software that you can do more fancy things. But everything that I've done through my phone without extra software. It's the software that comes with the phone. Same thing with making photos fuzzy and using filters. Somebody asked about an iPhone. Yes, almost any phone that you buy nowadays is going to have software that allows you to do all this kind of stuff. Play with it, experiment with it. And like I said, it's digital, so if you screw it up, it doesn't matter. You just delete it. Same thing with the impressionistic effects in my photographs. Was it post-processing blurring? Was it adjustment of the camera while you were taking the photograph? Both. The phone I have now can do that while I'm taking the photograph. Others do it after the fact. Someone wanted to know if I'm familiar with Richard Avedon. Oh, of course, yes. Where the light is almost the most important part of the photography. Light is almost the most important part of any photograph. That's what a photograph is. That's where the word comes from. It is using light to write. That it comes from Greek, photos, and graph, which means to write. It is using light. It used to be using chemicals. Now it's using technology to take light from out in the world, bring it into a device through a lens, and turn it into an image. That's exactly what photography is. So whether it's color, whether it's composition, whether it's details or black and white, all of it is learning how to look at what you see in the world around you. And you do that by using light. Light comes into your eye, hits the rods and cones in the back of your eye, and your optic nerve translates that somehow that we don't quite understand in your brain into seeing something. The idea of a camera is to do exactly the same thing using technology. Let's see. How many shots did I take of that stork taking off? Oh, actually, the stork was a pelican. And I took probably 3 or 4, but it was not a video. That was the one that came out the best. And then, yes, what you can do with if you have a video, when you find the exact frame that is exactly where you want, where, like in the example I showed you, where the seagull was just taking the cookie out of the woman's hand. Once you find exactly the frame that you want, then the camera will allow you to just copy that into a different place where you can do what you want of it. The skull photo was cool. I'm not sure which one that was. How do you bleed out color? That's another thing where it all depends on your software. Many the kinds of things that you might play with in any software, when you're talking about color, it's usually referred to as saturation. The saturation is how much of that color is in the photograph, and you can increase the saturation, which will make the grass much greener than it was in real life, or you can bleed out the color by decreasing the saturation, which will make the grass look grayer. And it's entirely up to you what effect you want to do. In most cases, that's something you're doing after you've taken the photograph. And I don't typically take photos in RAW. Somebody asked that. The only time I take raw photos usually is when I'm doing astrophotography. My phone happens to have the ability to do astrophotography, and I should have included one of those in this because I just started doing that this year. I can actually take long exposure photographs of anywhere from like 3 minutes to 10 minutes. And if you're in a place where the sky is dark enough and you don't have light pollution, you can get really amazing photographs of the Milky Way. And those are best taken in RAW. And then you can process the raw photograph to give the detail that you want of the sky. That's a lot of fun to be able to do that. Somebody asked about the travel book that I mentioned. It's called Black Lamb and Gray Falcon. I'll put it in the whoops. I'll put it in the chat. It's one of my favorite travel books, although it's extremely long. It's like 1,000 pages. And Gray Falcon. Whoops. But it's one of the best travel books ever written. Rebecca West. If you have any interest in just classic travel literature or in the Balkans in particular, she traveled between the wars. Most of it was in the 30s before World War II broke out. But her writing is incredibly insightful and also very funny in a lot of places. So I recommend her. I think I got all the questions. I think so.
So Jeff,
however, Robert
ahead.
usually, when he sends his follow-up email, he usually includes my email. So
Yes.
if you have any questions I didn't answer, feel free to email me later and I'll do my best to answer them.
Exactly. I was going to mention that. So, folks, let's give Jeff a big virtual round of applause. As he said, so later tonight, before I leave, I will email you all a link to this recording. I will email you information about some other upcoming armchair travel presentations. I will include Jeff's email and Instagram. When you log out in 30 seconds, you will get an anonymous feedback survey that pops up. Please take 60 seconds and fill that out. Let us know what you thought of today's program and what you'd like to see for future programs. I believe we're very likely to have Jeff come back on Tuesday, October 29th, but I don't quite have the details yet. But stay tuned for those. Jeff, any last words for the audience?
If you don't have a camera, get one. If you have a phone, use it. Everyone has phones now, so no matter where you are, no matter when you are, you have a decent camera in your pocket. Play with it, have fun with it, and practice and get better, because you don't have to be a professional. You can be doing it just for the joy of doing it, for yourself. And it's a great way to be creative without a lot of technology and without a lot of training. Just have fun with it.
Yeah, a good message to end on. So, folks, thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their afternoon. Thanks again, Jeff.
Thanks for having me back and hope to see you next time.
Absolutely.